The region's headlines follow ITV's nightly news.
Charities say the Kosovo refugee crisis is out of control. The captured soldiers face court tomorrow. And the Lockerbie suspects, their handover is imminent.
From ITN, the ITV Nightly News with Andrea Catherwood.
The United Nations warned today that the refugee crisis in the Balkans is reaching nightmare proportions. It said that more than 600,000 people, a third of Kosovo's population, have fled, and Macedonia and Albania have called for more help from the international community urgently. ITN's Tom Bradby reports from the Albanian border.
6 days, 6 nights, and still they come. This is the ruthless and efficient eviction of a people. Soon there may be no one left to bring their grief with them. Sometimes the relief of getting here is too much. This man said he was wounded by a Serb shell. This man said he saw his 3 nephews murdered by the Serbs and that they were forced to leave the village before they could bury them. This family said they fled their village but were followed by the police. Their menfolk split off and they wait for them here. They said a young girl in the party ahead of them was taken away by the Serbs. We are beginning to form the impression now that almost the whole of the ethnic Albanian population of Kosovo may be on the move. There are perhaps 2 million of them, so how long this exodus is going to continue is anyone's guess. The aid agencies are frank, they can't cope.
Logistically, this operation is a nightmare. We have only one route, one. There is such a congestion of vans and buses going up and down to collect the refugees that it takes a lot of time.
There is only one ray of light. These people are now safe, and the vast majority of local Albanians are doing everything they can to help. Tom Bradby, ITN, on the Albania-Kosovo border.
Well, just before we came on air, I spoke to Tom Bradby. I began by asking him what tonight holds for the refugees on both sides of the border.
I think it's going to be pretty desperate, to be honest, certainly on this side of the border. The original strategy was, when the refugees were coming over at sort of 10,000 a day, was to move them immediately out down to Tirana and other areas that were better prepared to look after them. But the last 2 days or so, the numbers have just got overwhelming and they can't do that anymore. So basically, around me in the darkness, and certainly in Kukes, the town near here, they're going to be sleeping out in the open in their thousands. It's not too cold, but it does get quite cold at night. It's raining. And don't forget, these people have been walking for days, some of them. And I think we all feel here that it's very difficult, however hard we try, to give a real sense of what's going on here, to do justice to it. Because for us, an awareness of the scale of the tragedy comes, it's a cumulative thing. You stand here all day and all night, and they just come streaming past in their thousands. Many of them are crying. Everywhere you go here, people are crying, and they've lost everything. Behind them are their jobs, their homes. They don't know where their friends are. They don't know where their families are, some of them. They've left their whole society behind, and there really is not much ahead of them.
Thomas, you say they're arriving with nothing, and many of them don't even have any papers. What kind of problems is that going to give for their long-term future?
People are saying the Serbs are taking off their papers and their car number plates so that they have no proof of their nationality. And one day that may be very difficult for the Kosovo people, the Kosovo Albanian people, if whatever, it's hard to know what will happen, but that may prove to be very difficult.
Tom, thank you very much indeed. The situation is equally bad in Macedonia. Its government said today the refugee crisis is threatening the country's stability and public order is in danger of breaking down. It also accused the international community of not doing enough to help. Here's Helen Wright.
Playing their part in a relief effort that's close to breaking point, British soldiers have spent today building a tent village. It'll give shelter to a few thousand Kosovar refugees tonight. 20,000 spent last night sleeping in the open here at Blace, just inside the Macedonian border. The country's government said tonight it can no longer cope with the influx of refugees. Some of its neighbours in the region are in the same position. Aid agencies say their operations in the Balkans are also close to being overwhelmed. Almost 250,000 refugees have so far fled Kosovo. Providing clean drinking water is a priority. Oxfam today flew supplies and sanitation equipment into the area. Feeding the displaced is a battle. It's hard to move supplies around, though more food, clothes and medicines are being shipped in. Israel, Italy, France and the UK are among the countries sending aid. There'll be more relief flights in the next week, though some governments in this crisis-hit region are urging the international community to fly refugees out to ease their burden. Helen Wright, ITN.
The 3 American soldiers who are being held in Yugoslavia are expected to appear in court tomorrow. Officials there said evidence was being collected to begin criminal proceedings. ITN's Julian Mannion is in Belgrade. His report was monitored by Yugoslav security officials.
The 3 American soldiers captured on Wednesday are now under some form of criminal investigation. According to a statement from Serbia's provisional government in Kosovo, the process of collecting evidence for criminal proceedings has begun. There has been speculation that the 3 could be charged with entering Yugoslavia illegally and espionage, but no official details have been given. From the Yugoslav government's point of view, the advantages of staging some sort of court proceedings against the 3 American soldiers are clear. It's a move that will command television coverage and provoke debate in the United States. It will also have considerable support among ordinary Serbs who are increasingly angered by the airstrikes and their apparent inability to hit back. In the capital, Belgrade, anti-NATO demonstrators have gathered to try to protect one of the city's main bridges after an airstrike demolished a well-known bridge in the northern city of Novi Sad. The Serb response to the bombing is ever more strongly nationalist. And if this voluntary human shield movement takes off, it could add to the complications facing NATO. Julian Mannion, ITN, Belgrade.
President Clinton tonight warned Yugoslav President Slobodan Milosevic again that he would be held responsible for the safety of the servicemen. He insisted they were on a peaceful mission and there was no basis for them being put on trial. Sue Saville reports.
For the friends and families who are waiting for news of what's happening to the 3 captured American servicemen, the stress of the uncertainty is mounting.
That Chris and his fellow soldiers are returned safely. And that will be an incredibly happy day for us all.
As Americans paid tribute at the Vietnam War Memorial today, people were also thinking of the 3 captive soldiers.
Fearful for the boys, praying for them, hoping that our country can maybe do something, get them out.
Hoping that they get a safe return back, concerned for their families.
The President's national security team fears the soldiers will not get a fair hearing.
The concept of free and fair justice in Yugoslavia today is probably remote.
President Clinton again stressed there's no basis for the soldiers to stand trial and warned that action in Yugoslavia won't be short-term.
I do not believe that anyone should expect or should have expected. We recognized when we started that this campaign, this air campaign, would not be a week or 2 proposition.
And to further bolster America's involvement in the Balkans, President Clinton is now considering sending the first US aircraft carrier to the region. Sue Saville, ITN, Washington.
NATO admitted today that its airstrikes hadn't stopped Serb troops from driving ethnic Albanians out of Kosovo. But commanders maintained that the attacks are steadily harming Yugoslav forces in spite of the continuing problems with the weather. Robert Moore reports.
Even as they prepared for further combat missions tonight, the frustration for NATO pilots is growing. Thick and low cloud over Kosovo is still hampering their bombing raids. But America's highly capable all-weather B-1 bomber has arrived at an RAF base and is already making its first bombing runs over Yugoslavia. NATO is also taking comfort from the fact that Milosevic and his forces are critically short of fuel.
Last night's attacks therefore continued to focus upon his fuel supplies, especially in the Kosovo region. And this will further inhibit the ability of his forces to repress the Kosovar Albanians.
The West is deploying ever greater military resources to the Balkans. And when the weather finally clears, Serb forces can expect an overwhelming NATO air assault. Complicating that military picture, Russia today dispatched its first naval vessel to the Adriatic, a reconnaissance ship designed to monitor the war. And in Belgrade, Russian MPs were meeting President Milosevic, although there's no sign of a fresh diplomatic initiative underway. At the same time, the Yugoslav leadership has declared it's ready to hand over to Moscow the wreckage of America's top-secret stealth fighter. Indeed, reports from Moscow tonight say that key parts of the aircraft that crashed 6 days ago have already been flown to Russia for analysis. Robert Moore, ITN.
Today's other news, the government has said it believes 2 Libyan men who have been accused of the Lockerbie bombing will be handed over imminently. Scottish police officers have flown to Holland, where the Libyans will be tried. Here's Ben Scotchbrook.
A huge team of Scottish police officers arriving in Rotterdam today. They've come to wait for the 2 Libyans accused of the Lockerbie bombing. The Scots were taken directly to Camp Zeist, a Dutch airbase where the trial will be held. Libya finally agreed last year to hand over the 2 intelligence officers for trial in a Scottish court established in Holland. Relatives of the victims believe the suspects could arrive this weekend.
It's a tremendous relief. The job of the court is to decide the guilt or innocence of the 2 accused. That's straightforward. But the absence of the trial has been a major obstruction to us. We want to know why the thing was not prevented.
270 people died when Pan Am Flight 103 exploded over Lockerbie in December 1988. More than 10 years after the horror, trial proceedings may finally be about to start. Ben Scotchbrook, ITN.
The Northern Ireland Secretary, Mo Molan, gave an upbeat assessment of the prospects for the peace process today. She said important steps were made at this week's talks, which were adjourned with a draft declaration being drawn up.
All of them have something in there. They've got to work with their parties on the other bits. That's the reality. But the commitment to the principle and the desire to move forward is so strong that it's not a gloss.
Tennis Britain's Tim Henman and Greg Rusedski were both beaten today in their Davis Cup matches in Birmingham. Now they have to win tomorrow's doubles to have any hope of success. Will Walden watch them play.
Tonight, an all-too-familiar story. 100 years after the first Anglo-American Davis Cup meeting, Great Britain's spark has clearly failed to ignite. Britain began as favourites, but this evening America, in the shape of Todd Martin, took less than 2 hours to dispose of Greg Rusedski. The normally faultless Rusedski serve lacking in both power and direction. Martin exploiting the weaknesses wonderfully. Defeat in 3 sets as embarrassing for Rusedski as it was comprehensive for Martin. Earlier, Tim Henman had fought out an epic 5-set match with Jim Courier, Henman playing at times some wonderful tennis. The British #1 never led, but did show extraordinary courage, saving 4 match points in the 4th set. It wasn't, however, enough. America 2-0 up tonight. Britain's hopes of reaching the quarter-final all but over. Will Walden, ITN Sport.
Football, Aston Villa and West Ham both saw their chances of qualifying for the UEFA Cup fade tonight when they drew 0-0 in the Premiership. Villa dominated the play, but a Dion Dublin header which hit the post was the closest they came to scoring. West Ham lost the England defender Rio Ferdinand after only 6 minutes with an ankle injury. And Kitson's shot couldn't clinch it for the Londoners in the final moments of the game. And the main news again, the United Nations has warned that the refugee crisis in the Balkans is reaching nightmare proportions. A third of Kosovo's population has fled from the province, and Macedonia and Albania have called for more help from the international community urgently. And the 3 American soldiers who are being held prisoner in Yugoslavia are expected to appear in court tomorrow on criminal charges. And now for a look at some of tomorrow's papers. The Independent leads on the refugee crisis. It says its picture of the massed ranks fleeing Kosovo is like an oil painting of hell. The Times focuses on the military campaign, saying the alliance has been cleared to bomb at will, but its front page picture features baby Katie, who has the world's smallest heart pacemaker. Easter in Europe is the Mail's front page. It says, as Brussels goes on holiday, refugees face catastrophe. The Sun carries an Easter message in Serbo-Croat for Slobodan Milosevic. In English, it means don't let them die. And the Mirror calls the refugee crisis a catastrophe. That's all from the ITV Nightly News. From all the team here, good night and enjoy the rest of the Easter weekend.
Good evening. Well, it's been another decent day for most places, especially in the west of Scotland, the Isle of Skye getting 20 degrees. But further south, we've had a bit of an interruption to the fine spell, more in the way of cloud and one or two thundery showers crossing the country, fairly isolated affairs. But they'll rumble on into the night in a few spots, elsewhere becoming essentially dry. One or two mist patches forming inland, though, as those temperatures dip to a fairly cool 3 or 4 Celsius. Now, later on in the night, the cloud thickening again down to the extreme southwest, introducing some patchy light rain here. That'll invade into other southern coastal counties through tomorrow morning. So a damp start to the day for southern parts of England and Wales, but further north, still dry, some brightness, some sunshine once that mist has cleared. I think the north of Scotland seeing some of the best weather tomorrow afternoon, although the odd shower is quite possible up over the Highlands. Further south, an invasion of cloud across many parts of England and Wales and Northern Ireland with some patchy drizzly rain, nothing too heavy. And later on in the day, I think things cheering up down in the extreme southwest. Temperature-wise, well, again on the warm side, typically around 14 to 16 Celsius, but cooler on that east coast once more with that wind coming in off the North Sea. Look ahead to Easter Sunday, and a lot of dry and bright weather, especially in the east, but more in the way of cloud generally. For western Scotland and Northern Ireland, a lot of rain coming in, and that reaching other western fringes later on in the day. And that cloud and rain edging further eastwards on Monday, so rather damper scene for a part of the country, but the extreme southeast staying rather dry, and temperatures still mostly just above the average for the time of year. That's it from me. I'll leave you with tomorrow's summary.
Power Gen. Power, whatever the weather.